Welcome to Beyond the Riverwalk, the local weekly podcast that brings San Antonio's most remarkable people, places, and events directly to you. All links discussed will be in the show notes, so sit back, relax, and join Kevin and Melissa Barron as they ask the questions that you would. Now, let's get the conversation started.
Well, welcome everybody back to Beyond the Riverwalk. This is Kevin, and joining me today is not Melissa. Joining me today is a friend named John Largent, and John is big in the podcast community, has been doing it for a long time, and I've invited him over to talk about the Texas Podcasters Association and whatever else we end up talking about. So this is going to be a little bit different of an episode, but if you have an interest in podcasting or just the city and how the community can come together, I would urge you to stay put. So let's go to John. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I have to say it's an honor to be here, and Beyond the Riverwalk is one of my favorite podcasts, so it's doubly an honor to be on your show.
Well, we appreciate it, and being here with me. Normally we're talking to everybody through Skype, so actually having someone to look at besides Melissa is unusual. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
That's right. Yeah, watch what you say.
But anyway, so today, we were going to talk a little bit about what I've been seeing online is you've set up a group on Facebook and I'm sure elsewhere called the Texas Podcasters Association, and you're building that group up. But can you start, I guess, what's your background? How'd you get into podcasting and how did it lead to working on that group?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird story, but I'll tell you, I much like you, my background is in healthcare. I was a healthcare administrator for a number of years, almost 25 years, and worked primarily in rural and mid-sized community hospitals. And I got to a point where I just wanted to change. I just wanted to pivot in my life. And my wife asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I love food and I love sports. And she said, well, go find something to do in that realm. And if you can make a living at it, go for it. So I took her at...
Yeah, you can find the first two. I don't know about the last one.
Exactly.
But we'll see.
Exactly. So I took some time and I toured a number of NFL stadiums as well as, I want to say close to 100 college stadiums, and I was really interested in the tailgating culture, and no one was really talking to that community, catering to that community. So I created a podcast and an organization that catered to that group. It's still going strong today, and we have listeners in all 50. My tagline for my show is, we have listeners in all 50 states, all provinces in Canada, and over 50 countries across the world. And it's funny though, because people don't always listen for the reasons you expect. I got an email not too long ago from a lady that lived in Estonia in Eastern Europe. Yeah. And she said, I don't really know what you're talking about, but I'm learning English by listening to because you talk slowly.
Oh,
my East Texas drawl, I guess. Yeah. So if any of you in Estonia are listening to this podcast and you hear someone that has a Texas drawl, she's probably listening to my show because that's how she learned English.
That's pretty cool.
So so you never know what people are doing. So fast forward, and from that outshoot, we started getting requests to produce other podcasts. And so I went full or all in on being a podcast producer, and we have a company called GameDay Media that caters to anybody that wants to start a podcast, and we really work and coach with people, and we're trying to grow the community as a whole. And so that was the original genesis of the Texas Podcasters Association.
Now, when you started doing podcasting, was there a community? Where did you find a community if it started?
I had to go
when it started.
Yeah, I had to go to Florida. I went to Florida. They have I would say a more mature group that has evolved over the years, and I started going out to an event called the Podcast Multimedia Expo, and met some really wonderful people that I consider close friends. I go every year. It's less of a conference and more of kind of a homecoming because we know all the people there. And of course, there's new people every year. It's grown exponentially. And I told Chris Kermitzos, the gentleman that started that thing, that I'm really just taking the elements of that and trying to duplicate it here in Texas, and because he's been so successful and has created such a vibrant community in Florida.
Well, just to wind the clock back a second, do you remember what the first podcast was you listened to? Has it been a while?
I want to say originally I listened to Adam Curry's.
Okay.
So it was what was the name of that podcast? I haven't listened to it in years, but he still does it.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
He's right up the road in Austin and he still does the podcast, but that's really what got me started.
See, ours, I think the first one that I listened to, and I remember, was WDW Radio with Lou Mangello.
Yep.
And I mean, he's like, I guess back then was to me the guru of the guy. And then I found, like Cliff Ravenscraft and the other people that were teaching people how to do it, and watched a ton of videos and, messed up a lot of things.
Yeah. Of course.
Before we moved here, we did a podcast in South Carolina. So that's where I learned some stuff. But in terms of sense of community, that was back, I guess that was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I knew a few people who did them, but there wasn't anybody else that I know of. Kind of getting tongue tied. In the community we lived in, it was a relatively small place, 110, 120,000 people. So there really wasn't one unless it was online.
Right.
But it seems like that's changed, right? So how are you connecting with people locally?
Yeah, and to your point about not having anybody, when I first started, I had a studio much like you, in my home upstairs, and people would come and be visitors on my show, guests on my show, and my neighbors always wondered, what does he do? He never leaves.
People coming in and out of the building.
Yeah, and what's going on there? But to answer your question, we have really gotten active on social media and have created events for people to meet people that have like interests. We do everything from a monthly meeting of the Texas Podcasters Association to hosting Podcasting 101, how to edit with Audacity, how to market your podcast. So we do free courses for people in the community to really get them involved and give them a shot and let them try. I mean, people, I tell them the hardest thing to do is to put your mouth to the microphone. You can't do a podcast until you do that. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be good the first time you do it. I don't know anybody that's just rolled right into it. Even seasoned broadcasters have trouble because oftentimes you're in a closet, you're talking to yourself. I didn't have the luxury of having my wife will not do a podcast, so I can't get her to even sit beside me while I do it. So I'm generally talking to myself.
The first one I remember doing, you just brought back this memory. Were three of us. There were two guys that were chefs. Four of us actually. There was a friend of mine and me, and we sat down at a table in a restaurant, and it was based on food in South Carolina. And it was just noisy and the echo, and we had a ball talking, just into microphones, but it was so much fun. And if I played it now, I'd probably cringe, right? Everybody says that when they do podcasting for a while, it's like, don't go listen to the original shows, please. But it was fun to do. And I guess you get hooked on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it is everybody's got a story. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a unique story to tell. And what's happening now, what we're seeing in the elevation, we talked a little bit, or the evolution, we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but more and more, not only people, but more and more entities are understanding and embracing the value of having a podcast for their company, their nonprofit organization, their church, their school, because what we tell folks when they consider it is, hey, this is your voice. You get to tell your story your way. Because I know I have been in situations, whether it's in a sales situation or another situation, where you have your pitch and you talk about it, and then, well, I'm not the decision maker. I'll just tell them what you said. Well, they're not going to say it with the same passion. They're not going to include the important details because it's not important to them. Yeah. And so until you're able to capture the culture, the sense of mission that people have, you really can't do it. And so companies are really finding that there is a loyalty aspect of creating something that creates value for their brand, their name, their organization, and I love that. It's exciting.
I've always thought this kind of medium is very very personal. Because at least me, I listen to podcasts in the car. I listen to them with earbuds at work. It's whoever it is on the other end of that recording talking directly to me. It may be multiple people. It may be one person. But it's personal because, one, I want to hear whatever that person has to say because I went and sought them out. So like you're saying, from an organizational standpoint, it's a captive audience, and it seems like it's a little odd because there's hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, but there's all these little niches. And if you're interested in, anything, you can find a podcast on it. But it still brings it back to being something really personal so that, those interests that you have, you find are shared with someone. And if that turns out to be, you're talking about different organizations, if that turns out to be a hospital, that turns out to be, a restaurant, if it turns out to be anything, you're connecting with that little community who now has an insight into your life, into a way you think. The first time we met Lou with WDW Radio, I felt like I knew the guy. And I'm sure he was looking at me like I'm crazy, because my daughter thought she knew him and my wife thought she knew him.
And he's such a nice guy, by the way.
I mean, we had breakfast with him at the Polynesian Resort one morning. But it was a weird thing because you hear them talk to you. You kind of get to know people. So it's a really great way to connect with, whether it's customers, friends, or just people that share stuff.
And one thing you said that I have experienced, and you've probably experienced too, is that intimate relationship you have with your audience. If you're putting out a podcast on a regular basis, and then for some reason that's interrupted, I get tweets, I get emails. Oh, is everything okay? What's wrong? What are you doing? I mean, is there anything we can do to help? Because they're so used to that, they do feel that they have a relationship, and they do. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very, very personal. But the other thing that we've kind of seen on the corporate side is that we're working with a couple of large organizations that have a few thousand sales reps across the country. And one of the things that we helped them solve a problem with was, getting everybody the same information on a timely basis. Because if you get on a conference call and half the people haven't muted their phone, or there's different things that cause disruption. With this, they're able to have a clear, concise message in a really professionally created manner that they have, all of them have on demand that they can listen to, and it remains secure because there's way now to secure that.
If it's coming from the CEO or the head of some division, how often are they going to hear from them directly?
Right.
Especially if they're spread across the country or around the world. Yeah, that's a great point. That really is. Well, we were going to, the purpose, I guess, was to talk about the Podcast Association. So first of all, I guess, wasn't there one before? I mean, podcasting has been around for a while. So I guess my first question was, is this brand new, or is this something that's been there and you're just developing, or what?
This is brand new. I don't know that there's ever been a Texas Podcasters Association.
I've not heard of one before talking to you, so I wasn't sure.
This goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about how all the different communities, all the different cities have their own podcasting meetup groups, and they have their own small ecosystem. And the primary purpose of this is because I really look at podcasting as a collaborative community. Mm-hmm. It's not a competitive community. I think that we all bring our strengths, our stories, and they're all unique. And so one of the things that is probably a paramount thing as far as the association is elevating the podcasting industry in general. How do we create better podcasts, whether it's audio sound, whether it's rich content, whether it's storytelling? The fastest growing aspect of podcasting is audio dramas, and those are fiction. Those are stories. I remember talking to my mother not that long ago. She's 80 years old, and she's like, we used to sit around the radio and listen to stories. And so everything that's old is new again, and it's done in a way that makes it on demand. And so part of that is to not only elevate the podcasting community, but to recognize people that are being excellent in it. And we're going to have the Best in Texas Podcast Awards, and we're going to showcase some of the best talent in the state. And I'm super excited about it. It's going to be a lot of work to coordinate, but we're gonna make it happen. And I think that Texas as big as it is, as rich as the talent pool is, we can do this, and it's going to be important to embrace that and reach out to the entire podcasting community. Which this summer I'm doing a tour of Texas. So I'm going to go to Houston, and I'm going to Dallas, I'm going to Fort Worth, I'm going to Austin, and I'm going to say, look, we're not trying to take away from your local group. We just want you under this umbrella so that we can understand and really take part and share the content that you guys are bringing to the table.
We've lived here for, I guess, almost 3.5 years now. And if there is any state that should have pride that runs from, state line to state line, it's Texas. So, Houston and Dallas, then we may have some differences, especially Austin, who thinks they know how to do tacos, versus San Antonio. But we're going to come together, I'm sure, for this and like for a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I have heard from other people. I was in Austin last week at it was called the Outlier Podcast Festival, and spoke to several people from different parts of the state and Austin, and they were like, absolutely, we would participate in this. This is long overdue. And so we plan on bringing world-class and local, regional, Texas-based podcasters to the event, as well as a ton of networking and then a few other surprises along with the awards show. So it's going to be a day and a half just packed. Yeah. And the tentative dates right now are November 1st and 2nd in San Antonio. Okay. So we're still working out the details of where we're going to hold it and how many people we're going to be there. It's not going to be huge, but it should be well attended, and
it'll probably be bigger than either of us are thinking.
I'm a little nervous about that, actually. But
well, one of the things we talked about in the past and a little while ago, I guess, before we started, was the whole idea of what's happened in the community in San Antonio and podcasting. When we started doing this a couple of years ago, and we took this long hiatus when we moved, there weren't that many local podcasts that I could find. I mean, a lot of churches put out the Sunday sermons and the other messages out, and that's very common, in a lot of cities. But there weren't a lot of other ones out there. Well, when we kind of restarted this spring, there are tons of San Antonio podcasts out there now. And I'm sure it's true of every other city. So it's really exploded. And we've talked a little bit, I think, about why. I mean, one thing we hadn't talked about is just the accessibility of it. It's
right.
The technology is probably a lot easier than it was 10 years ago.
For sure.
And then, people are just more willing to give it a shot. But in putting together this association, how are you, I guess, reaching out to folks to join? Is there a membership that you need to do? I mean,
the membership.
What are the kind of the bullet points on getting involved?
Yeah, the membership is free. We do have meetings in San Antonio, and there's a small charge for those, like $5, and that just covers the room, basically. We're really in acquisition mode right now. Okay. We really want just as many people as we can, whether they are thinking about a podcast all the way to somebody like you that's been doing this for a long time, to be a part of the community, because you can share so much information no matter where you are in that podcasting journey. So that's the first thing is it's everybody and anybody that is interested in podcasting or interested in advertising with podcasting. That's another thing that's the barriers are starting to change, and advertisers are finding real value in niche audiences because it is hyper targeted, and so we're talking to advertisers and wanting to embrace them participating as well. So they might find a podcast that works well with them. So we're just trying to bring that community together along with the equipment. As you said, you can start a podcast now with your phone using something like Anchor. Mm-hmm. And all the way up to your setup here, which is really nice. And we have a studio just north of downtown that's really nice. And Geekdom has just built a studio in the basement, which is really nice. There is a restaurant in town called Southtown 101. They have a studio inside their restaurant.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they not only do they podcast, but they live stream. And I've actually heard that the Sheridan Hotel here and in Houston, I think, are building podcast studios in their hotels because so many people are utilizing. So the landscape is changing.
That's interesting. Yeah,
and it's really exciting that this phenomenon. It's not a fad. It's a phenomenon, and it's not quite mainstream yet. It's still about half the people when you say podcast don't know what you're talking about. But it's vastly different than it was just a few years ago.
I was looking at the I guess whatever the latest report was, and the name of the organization slipping my mind, but it's the one that does it every year.
The Edison report?
Yeah. So how many people are doing this? And they said, the average person listens to, I think, 7 episodes or 7 individual shows per month. And I think it was like you were saying, just over half knew what podcasts were or somewhat familiar with it, which is huge because I remember doing those stats just a few years ago, looking at the same thing when we started this one. And it was like 30%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost doubled in a couple of years, and that's national. That's not just local.
Right.
So, yeah, I haven't been able to so far, but I'm really looking forward to getting involved. And I'm assuming if you're going to do the event here in town, you're going to be looking for volunteers?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always going to be looking for volunteers. And the other thing that we recognize, too, is that not everyone can make a live event, especially if it's in San Antonio and you want to come to the monthly meeting, because we have great speakers there, and we usually have someone that does an equipment review or something. So we're gonna play with doing virtual meetings as well, and doing live stream meetings as well. So we want to make it as accessible. It's it's kind of like the healthcare industry. 25 years ago, you had a big hub hospital, and people came to you. Now, if you look on any corner, there is an acute care center. So we're doing the same thing. We're taking action out into the community and doing the free training and doing the free orientation and doing the virtual courses and things like that, so that there's no barrier to get involved. And so we're just trying to make it as simple as we can.
Here's a kind of a unique situation, or maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I've kind of grown up doing this using Macs. My wife is not a Mac person. She likes, just the regular Windows PCs. So we've got another laptop, and she wants to learn how to edit. So I'm like, I use GarageBand. I use something very simple. I'm not great at it, but I do whatever's easy, and it seems to work okay. But she needs to use something else. So in this case, you guys would do orientations and how to get involved in that kind of stuff, and how to learn how to do it. So even if you have some knowledge about it, if you want to expand it, this is an organization that can help you.
Absolutely. And things like Audacity are free. And I can't believe that's a free service, because they just upgraded their software, and it's amazing. I mean, it really is. And so as I said, the barrier to entry is so low now, as far as at least getting started. Now, there are some nuances once you've done it for a while, as you well know, and editing is very subjective at times. But there's so many different ways to get involved and to just be curious. I mean, again, nobody's interested in what I'm. Yes, if you're thinking it, somebody's interested. I promise you. We met a person that does a podcast on raising iguanas, and they have a huge following, and they have PetSmart as a sponsor. So I would, I'm like, okay, that's not something that I'm interested in, but there are people out there that are.
Well, when we talked about doing this one, the idea was, what are we gonna do it about? And what we did, I guess when we first moved to South Carolina, was try to get out, and we did a food blog, and that led to the podcast. And the purpose of it was to get us to go out and meet new people, because we didn't know anybody in the area and that kind of thing. Well, lo and behold, we did the same thing when we came here. But instead of looking at the food thing, which I thought would help me lose a little weight, it really hasn't. I should have done that anyway. We tried to look at what else is out there in the city to know. So our little niche, if you want to call it, is things to do and people to meet and stuff beyond the Riverwalk. So it's sort of like everybody knows about the Riverwalk, everybody knows about the Alamo. But if you're going to move here, or you're just coming to visit periodically, what else is there to do?
Yeah.
And this is a huge city. So I don't think we're ever going to run out of stuff to talk about.
You're never going to run out of stuff, and you're never going to run out of new listeners too, because we've lived here over 20 years now. And I think the first 2 episodes were things I'd never heard of.
Oh, I've had people tell me that recently. It's like, I didn't know we had this. I didn't know we had a film festival.
Yeah.
I mean, that episode this past week is doing really well. And I was surprised. One, I didn't know the depth of what the festival was like. It's a big deal. And just wasn't connected in the arts part of the community. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, by doing these podcasts and anybody doing a podcast, you're going to meet people you never would otherwise. So I would recommend it. If you've got an interest in something and you want to find people that like what you do, just like you said, this is a way to do it. The one thing we haven't ventured into, and it sounds like the organization, the association may be able to help through some of these courses, we don't do anything with video. Right. And part of me is I'm really nervous about doing anything with video, because the other piece of it, apart from just having to be on camera, I'm just talking about live streaming type stuff, is you got to do video editing. I don't know anything about video editing, So some of that is a little intimidating still.
Yeah, and the barriers for that have even been lowered quite a bit too. I have the luxury of having a couple of 16-year-old boys that know video editing, and they've actually trained me on how to do that stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
But the live streaming is definitely, I would say it's very complementary to your podcasting. I don't think it takes anything away from it. I don't think it detracts from it, but I do think it enhances it, because people do want to put a face with a name, and there's some real value in that. We have a couple of clients that have turned their podcast, which they do in traditional form and audio form, but they've turned that into Q&As on live stream. And some of these are clinical people, and they make sure they express that they're not practicing at that time.
Right.
They're giving their opinion, and but it's been tremendously helpful, and numbers have been through the roof on the video side. So I think that there are ways to do that that are very impactful, and I think that we certainly, the Texas Podcasters Association embraces that YouTube community and people that are live streaming as well, and we have stuff specifically for them.
We watch a ton of YouTube, and it varies on what the subject is. A lot of Disney stuff, because family's a big Disney fan, Disney fans, I should say. But one of the things that surprised me, you made me think of, was the whole Joe Rogan thing.
Yeah.
As popular as that is, the thing that surprised me the most was that they go for 2, 3, 4 hours.
That's right.
They do the audio version, but then they do the video version. And I found myself sitting there and watching this for 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on who the guest is. So that whole long form thing is different. I mean, our show tends to be 30 to 45 minutes, something like that. Mm-hmm. And that tends to work for, at least traditionally, for me when I listen to shows, because I'm in the car, I got to commute to work, and it seems to fit okay. But what have you seen, I guess, change since you started? Is that a trend? Is that just unique to him because he's got this name recognition?
Yeah, no, it's not unique to him. In fact, there's a guy, Dan Carlin, that does a history podcast, and some of his episodes are 5 hours long.
Wow.
You can spend a whole week with one episode. Yeah. I think with Joe Rogan, I think part of what his appeal is, and I listen to him and watch too, I find myself catching him when he's got someone on that I'm really interested in, or I could do without some of the languge, but or the other activities they partake in. But
there's a few that might surprise some folks.
Yeah. But the content is really good, and he's a very good He's a very good interviewer, because it's very natural to him, and so I think that's the basis of his success. And he is probably the most successful podcaster right now. Is that he'll have a fellow comedian on one day, and he'll have a nuclear physicist on the next. His variety. I heard someone say he's the men's version of Oprah.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because he just knows a little bit about something, and he's got that.
Oh,
and if you watch his show, the production value is very simple. He's sitting on one side of a table, his guest is on the other, and he yells at someone off screen, "Jamie, can you put that up on the screen?"
Yep.
And that's the show, and it's exactly what you hear on the podcast. But I think it starts with the fact that he has interesting content.
Yeah.
And he works really hard at it. Sometimes he does 2 or 3 a day. And so he's garnered that loyal audience that comes to, if they want to find something new, he's typically talks about some very interesting things.
So I guess kind of bringing it back to the association, when we're talking about people that are whether they're brand new, whether they've been doing it for a while. It sounds like to get involved, they just got to look you up. So how do they find information? How do we find info on the association and connect with you?
Yeah, the best way is on Facebook. If you just type in Texas Podcasters Association, you'll find us. The community is growing every day, and we typically put out helpful information, information about meetings. We take polls periodically to just gauge what people are interested in talking about, and we're really trying to foster that community so that they're getting peer-to-peer information as well. Right now, it's still a little bit of coming from me, and I certainly don't claim to be an authority on podcasting, but by default, I guess, until the community becomes large enough to really take over and create all the content itself, it kind of works that way. But we're starting to see more and more people get engaged and start conversations, and have kept the content really on point with podcasting and how to start, grow, monetize, and speak your passion.
So that group, the Texas Podcasters Association group on Facebook, is going to have the information for the events.
Yes.
So each month they're going to be out there, and you'll know when and where and how to register, RSVP, I should say, I guess.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the other thing that we're going to start in end of June is we're going to have a Texas Podcasters Association podcast. And we're gonna.
I was gonna ask. I thought maybe that was too meta, but
no, it's not. we're going to interview hosts, and we're going to interview people that are doing great things in podcasting, and that'll be another way to find information. But the primary goal of that is to spotlight all the great podcasters in Texas.
Yeah, I love talking right here. I love talking to people that have a passion for this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is my hobby. This is what I enjoy doing when I'm not doing what I do for a living. And it's fun to talk to people who are that nerdy. I mean, you find people that are that way about, nowadays with Marvel and Star Wars, but people for those that don't know, people in the podcasting community are just as geeky as anybody else, if not more so.
Absolutely.
So you can really dive deep into this if you want to, or just have a good time and do it as a hobby.
Yeah. And I would say I'm probably, half immersed geekdom, as far. But when you start talking about waveforms and things, I'm out. Yeah. I'm not that technically savvy, but I do love talking about people embracing their inner voice. I know that sounds kind of nerdy in and of itself, but really talking about things that interest them, because there are other people out there that want to hear your voice, and you may be the only voice that they share that passion with, until they realize that there's a whole community around it. I can't tell you how many times
That's a good point.
Yeah, I've seen people say, I didn't know anybody else thought these things or believe this stuff or whatever it is.
Well, people nowadays, you hear I guess it's a cliche now, but people are so disconnected, even though they are connected on social media. I mean, we've known each other now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
We've not connected in person too often, but we do online.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here talking like I just saw you last week.
Right.
And a part of it is, I think, you share an interest, but part of it is you get to know people. And you find that you have something in common. You can build on that. And by doing this, putting out some kind of a show that you're interested in, whatever the subject is, you're going to find other people like that. Hopefully, maybe they're local. You can meet them in person. But, like you, we've had listeners, and when we were doing the one in South Carolina, the number 2 state after we had, number 3, I guess. South Carolina was the largest listenership. North Carolina was next. And then California for some reason. Mm-hmm. No idea why. Thought we had nothing in common with Californians from South Carolina. A lot of barbecue in South Carolina. I don't think a lot in L.A. But it was funny because you never know who you're gonna meet.
Yeah, and what I really love about it is, I equate it when I was young. My father had a shortwave radio.
Yeah, that's a good.
And
point.
he would talk to people in Australia, and he would talk to people in Nairobi, and just all over the world. And this is a new way to do it in a content rich environment that hopefully brings. I don't want to be too philosophical. It brings people together, because at the end of the day, people are the same. Our governments have differences and things like that, but the people that live in these communities, no matter where they are, pretty much the same.
Yeah.
They have different cultures and different beliefs, but at the fundamental root, people are looking to improve. They're looking for information. They want to be successful. They want to, and success is whatever it is in their mind. It's, but it does do that, and that's the exciting part to me is you don't know who you're touching, and you don't know how many lives you change, even if it's something mundane. I mean, I'm teaching English in Eastern Europe, to at least one person.
That's right.
Yeah. So
that's
who knows?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to kind of bring it home here because, if you want to learn those things, you want to get organized, you want to get connected with people, you want to learn this and have no knowledge about it whatsoever. First place to start, go out to Texas Podcasters Association on Facebook, sign up in the group and start talking to people, start asking questions.
Yeah. And no matter who you are and what your story is, there's an audience and there are people that want to listen to you.
Well, good deal. Well, I'm hoping we can connect a lot more in person and
Absolutely.
through whatever means we have to.
Yeah,
Stay
and congratulations on your show. It really is one of my favorites, and I love what you guys do.
Well, we enjoy doing it, and the main thing we get out of it is connecting. We keep going back to that, but the main thing we get out of it is connecting with other people and sharing things that we're enthusiastic about. So we'll see you soon, and hopefully everybody that's listening here, if you stayed with us and you've got an interest in podcasting, so go out to the Texas Podcasters Association, sign up, go to one of the meetings. Hopefully I'll meet you there. I know John will meet you there. And then hopefully November 1st and 2nd, we're looking at the first Texas Podcasters Association conference, I guess we can call it. Yeah. So it's more than a meetup. It's going to be an educational opportunity, awards, and everything else. So look for that, and you'll see that, I'm sure, in the group as well. So for John, this is Kevin. This is Beyond the Riverwalk, and I appreciate you joining us to learn a little bit more about podcasting and to do it here in the Alamo City.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Riverwalk. Send your comments, questions, and suggestions to podcast@beyondriverwalk.com. As always, subscriptions to our show are free and available wherever you find podcasts, as well as on our website. Until next week, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more conversations about our community.